Welcome to Conversation for Exploration. Hi, I'm your host, Laura Lee. When those who have a near-death experience come back and are convinced that they went to another realm, and yet scientists say, well, it was only a biochemical reaction that gave you this illusion, who's right? And whatever happened to those fascinating LSD experiments that were really taking some inroads into psychotherapy? Why are we so freaked out about hallucinatory experiences, and yet indigenous cultures the world over throughout time has made that a key component of their culture, the ability to transcend dimensions? Well, Rick Strassman has some answers to those questions. He's currently a clinical associate professor of psychiatry at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine. He's also the author of DMT, the Spirit Molecule. He conducted a series of tests with DMT put out by the adrenal glands. The pituitary glands. It's a natural component of our body. He was able to experiment with some volunteers and find out just how profound a molecule this is and how profound effect it has on our mystical experiences. Rick joins us from Taos, New Mexico. Hi, Rick. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Laura.
Well, tell me a bit of background about yourself first and how you started to look into these intriguing matters.
Well, I first got interested in just the possibility of psychedelic research during my undergraduate days, which was I went to Stanford as an undergraduate. This was in the early 1970s. And there was just getting to be an interest in altered states of consciousness, such as dreams, meditation. And it was also just at the cusp of the end of the first wave of human psychedelic research that had essentially started with the discovery of LSD around the end of World War II.
Did you yourself participate in those kinds of recreational activities at the time?
I had a lot of friends that were experimenting with those drugs, and I would hang out with them, pretty regularly. And I was amazed at at a couple things. I was amazed at the profundity of the actual experiences that were being had, and I was also struck as I was doing more study with the similarities between the states people were having with psychedelics, especially with LSD, and the descriptions of reports from the ancient mystical literature of deep meditation. Also at the time, there were just the beginnings of reports about the frequency and phenomenology of near-death experiences.
You decided to go looking for the neurochemical basis for such things.
Well, I figured if all these people were having these kinds of experiences, either with or without drugs, yes, there must be some biological commonality. So I began wondering if the brain itself made a psychedelic drug, and if so, where that might actually take place. And I was led to the possibility of the pineal gland, which had been sort of impugned as a mystical gland or a mystical organ in the center of the brain as a potential location of the production of a psychedelic compound.
So give us a quick history, though, of the use of psychedelics in general. They go back long, long ways in human history, don't they?
Well, sure. People have always been interested in altering their consciousness through, I guess, what you'd call external means, by drinking or smoking or snuffing barks and roots and leaves
mushrooms
and those sorts of things. People have been drinking wine for tens of thousands of years. And there's a couple of hypotheses out that ancient man would observe animals eating certain mushrooms or certain leaves of plants and appear to be intoxicated. And it was through mimicking the consumption of these substances that they observed in other animals that humans discovered or kind of stumbled upon the mind-altering properties of certain plants.
I've also heard that animals will eat fermented berries, in effect ingesting alcohol voluntarily, that they'll actually seek these kinds of fruit trees that have rotted and berry bushes and all of that out, from everything from birds to elephants. Is it true?
Well, it seems to be the case, yes. There does seem to be almost an innate instinct to alter one's consciousness that probably extends far beyond just the human in terms of its applicability to other animal species. It could be even considered on par with the urge to procreate, to sleep, to eat, those sorts of things. Almost an instinctual
people
urge.
says that it's a sixth drive to alter a state of consciousness.
That could be the case. We certainly spend a lot of time in dream sleep every night. So it certainly seems like there's some almost biological requirement for an altered state of consciousness. And there's certainly a lot of plants and mushrooms that contain quite powerful mind-altering chemicals.
Isn't it interesting that the plants that grow here on Earth would grow in such a way that the ingestion of them would simulate compounds that we readily produce or that we have the receptor sites for? It's when you look at evolution and the pollination sequence, where flowers will look like certain female bees to a certain brand of bee and something other. They're always trying to induce some interaction. So it's really not surprising that these plants would interact with humans and other mammals and our brains in such a way, I guess.
Well, I think so. And I think once people found out about how amazing the states of mind were that the ingestion of certain plants could result in, then those plants became holy or became extremely valuable to humans, and they would be protected and cultivated. So there is certainly an evolutionary advantage to plants having these profound states on consciousness.
Oh, okay. So where did you take your research from there? You knew that there was this historical basis, a lot of intriguing mystical experiences that people are reporting, ancient literature as well as in the present.
So I started to investigate whether the pineal gland might be a possible location for the production of a brain chemical that simulated or underlie or kind of mimicked or induced a profoundly psychedelic state of consciousness. But actually, to backtrack a bit, the whole issue of plants and animals, their sort of symbiotic relationship with these chemicals, once it became time for me to decide what particular compound to study, I chose to study DMT, which is actually abbreviation for dimethyltryptamine. And it's a chemical in plants and in animals as well. It's a naturally made compound that occurs in a huge number of plants. It's actually getting to be more interesting to comment or to describe plants that don't make DMT as those in which it actually is found. It's so profusely distributed among the plant kingdom. And
so we're ingesting this DMT a lot naturally anyway.
Well,
our pituitary gland is producing it, so. But it must be in very small amounts.
In small amounts, and it's also being made in our liver and in other parts of our brain. Also, it's made in the blood through the mechanism of red blood cells. They make DMT as well. So there are a number of organs in the animal body which produce measurable amounts of DMT constantly. And it's also found in plants. So it seems to be this kind of common denominator among the hallucinogens, kind of crossing both the plant and
when you
animals.
think of, Rick, that every night we have, how many sleep cycles, and part of the sleep cycles include dreaming, and dreaming is a